Hi everyone, I have a first time spins video here for you. These are 3 albums that I've played for the first time each, and I'm here to give you my thoughts on them and whether I'm going to keep them, listen to them again, or whatever. And let's get right underway with this, shall we? The first one was a long time in coming. My friend George, he's a really good guy. George, Music for All 4 Seasons. He's a big fan of Frankie Valli and the 4 Seasons. I like Frankie Valli and the 4 Seasons myself. But he sent me a copy of this album, which I actually never heard of before and didn't know existed, and I'm glad I do now. The Genuine Imitation Life Gazette. And this was released in 1969 by the 4 Seasons. And right away, you'll notice some familiarity about this kind of cover, which I will explain as I go along. All right, now George sent me 2 albums that he wanted to get my opinion on. This one I've listened to, and I'm going to present it in this particular chapter of this series. And the next time I do another one, I'll get to the second album that he sent me. That's the second album is not going to be featured in this particular installment. All right, now I got my notes all here ready to go. First of all, this is psychedelic concept album. Even though I say a concept album, not all the songs tie together as one thing. They're kind of individual topics. I thought that's what I got out of it. I played this album twice. One time on the turntable, and another time I actually did it through YouTube on the headphones when I was doing my morning walk. So I listened to it twice. It was so good the first time, I wanted to give it a second listen. So anyway, now, I don't know, this could be considered prog rock too. Maybe earlier prog rock. I first of all loved how experimental this was. It's very creative. I knew going into this was not your father's Frankie Valli and the 4 Seasons. You're not going to hear Ragdoll. You're not going to hear Sherry. You're not going to hear stuff like that. You're not going to hear Walk Like a Man. This is going to be different. And I really was kind of blown away by just how cool it was. Bob Gaudio and Jake Holmes were really responsible for this. And I heard there were a couple of singles released from here, but the singles didn't really do too well. Also heard, and some research I did, that John Lennon told Bob Gaudio this was one of his favorite albums. All right, and it could be true, because this reminds one of Sometime in New York City, album cover-wise. It looks a lot like that same design. You got the newspaper here, and how cool is it that there's more than one page, and the album is inside here, the record. Really cool. Really enjoyed that, and I have some songs listed down as to what I thought of them. I want to make sure I got all my notes here. This album has different sounds for the 4 Seasons. Strings, horns. It sounds like it's kind of like from the Sgt. Pepper era, or maybe 67 or 68. Now, since this came out in January 69, it's still close to 68. In a way, I kind of would have felt better for the sound of this if it had been an album released in 67 or 68. But January 69 is close enough to those 2 years. All right, now, I found this consistently interesting. There was one song out of it that I wasn't wild about. I'll get to that in a minute. But consistently intriguing and interesting. And now the favorite songs I have on here. First we have Genuine Imitation Life, which I enjoyed. I thought I noticed a Hey Jude sound at the end. Am I right? Let me know, listeners. My favorite song on here, I don't think it's everybody's favorite. I'll be willing to bet it's probably just an album track, but it was Mrs. Staley's Garden. That's my #1 favorite song on here. Just hit me right the first time, hit me even better the second time. There's a jazzy track on here I like called Something on Her Mind. And I also liked Soul of a Woman, which was really nice. A song called Saturday's Father that was kind of disturbing, depressing a little bit. Sounds like they're talking about a divorce and not being able to see the child, the father. So, Idaho, that's the one song here that I really wasn't wild about. And I heard that Idaho was the second single from this album. I guess, what do I know? But in a way I could see it, because the reason that I didn't like it was because it just sounded like the usual sound, the harmony sound that you're used to from the 4 Seasons. It wasn't really different like the rest of it. Sounded like they would give it in, okay, let's just throw them a bone and do one that sounds like our usual Four Seasons stuff. So that's the only reason why I wasn't that thrilled with that song. And it was the second single that came out, so I guess, it is commercial enough, and that's what they were going for, I guess. But I didn't like it within the context of the whole album as much. But anyway, this is something that I thank George for, because I did enjoy it. And I knew that on the first listen, which doesn't always happen. And the second listen just reinforced it. This is a nice curio for the Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons fan. But for me personally, I still prefer their other stuff other than this. But this was really nice to step away from it and get something that was more in that vein of the psychedelia experimental. All right, next up we have an album